This is the newly revised California Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions, C.A.R. Form RPA revised 1224. This is the revision that we'll be using probably for the next 6 months or so. And today's December 18th, 2024. It just got released. Now, much of this is the same. There are significant changes pertaining to commission and the seller's payment of commission for the buyer's broker, and some disappointing news with the SPBB. Now, I've gone through this form so many times, so many tutorials, so I'm just going to go through it quickly. I'll show you how to fill this out very quickly. It's a 28-page bundle now. Can you believe that? Excessively long, but we're going to go through it quickly regardless. Now, it starts with the disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship, which is a 2-page form. Both you and your buyer are going to sign on the bottom. And then you're going to move on because there's nothing to do on page 2. So here we are at the actual purchase agreement. Date prepared, that's the date we're drafting it. We put the name of our client here, the property address, city, county, zip code, assessor's parcel number, which can be obtained from the MLS or property tax bill or the county assessor's website. We come down here, don't forget to check these boxes. I even make that mistake. But you're going to put the seller's brokerage and agent and their respective license numbers. Check the box, which party they're representing. The buyers, brokerage, salesperson, and then their license numbers. And then we move on to the actual offer. Terms, purchase price, $800,000. This is just a made up number I put as a placeholder. Now, if it's all cash, check this box. We're going to do a sample of a financing buyer. We're putting a 30-day escrow. Check this box, write 30. You can put a definitive date if you want, but 30 is customary for a finance buyer. I'm leaving this expiration alone, and by default, 3 calendar days, this will expire. If you want to shorten or lengthen that period, you can edit it here. We're going to leave it alone though. EMD, earnest money deposit, or initial deposit amount, 1 to 3% of the sales price. I just put in 1%. Okay, increased deposit used to be on here, but in this version, they've moved it to this new form called the increased deposit addendum. So if you need to do this, which is extremely rare, check this box and incorporate the addendum. We're going to put 80% as the loan amount, which is $640,000. That's 80% of the purchase price. And by default, it's conventional. And I'm not even going to bother filling this out right here. Now, some agents can. I don't see anywhere this is contingent upon these terms exactly. You're already contingent upon financing. Now, it's good measure. I probably should be advising to fill this out with the top end of the rate and how many points, but I mean, that just doesn't happen typically in a real estate transaction. And I'm showing you as a seasoned broker how I fill this out. And then if it's a FHA or VA loan, check the appropriate boxes here. If there's seller financing, check that box. If there's an additional, like a second mortgage or the seller's carrying back a second loan, check this box and fill this out here. You'll know, but I'm just showing you just a conventional loan right there, easy. Okay, by default, primary residence, check the box. If it's not, it automatically calculates the balance of the purchase price, which is the down payment minus the EMD, and then you have the purchase price total here. Both parties initial, we move on. Now, this is where it gets interesting because, let's see if I can show you. See this red here? This is the template that they gave out. This shows you what has changed since the last version of the purchase agreement. And you can see it's largely relating to the seller payment of buyer's broker, right? And let me show you real quick. I'll show you how to fill it out. So they break it up into a couple different sections here. You have the seller credit to buyer for items not relating to broker compensation, because they've kind of parsed out between seller credits relating to and unrelated to. So you have a seller credit to buyer, okay? You could check this box and do a seller credit, and they say for closing costs. Okay, closing costs, I mean, that really has no net effect, but whatever. So you can put a seller credit there. Additional seller credit terms, you could probably write out an explanation as to what this relates to. If you need to be specific, this seller credit is for a particular issue. Let's say you're buying the home, but you negotiated verbally and you want to put in the offer that the seller's crediting the buyer for some, the pool needs to be resurfaced. I mean, you could put it all in here. Or just closing costs to offset the buyer. Maybe the buyer's maybe the buyer doesn't have a lot of cash for closing costs. Okay. Down here though, this is where it pertains to the seller's payment of the buyer's broker. Now, so what I realized here is that you must check this box if you're incorporating this, okay? Seller's payment to buyer's obligation, for buyer's obligation to compensate buyer's broker. Buyer compensation affirmation. My gosh, that's wordy. Seller agrees to pay out of transaction proceeds, and then you write in how much do you as a buyer's agent, how much did you have on your BRBC, your buyer representation agreement? That's what you're asking for. You cannot put more than what's on your BRBC, your buyer representation agreement. So that number should match what's on your BRBC, okay? And they even reference the obligation of buyer to compensate buyer's broker, because they're saying, hey, there's an existing obligation on the representation agreement, the BRBC, and we're asking the seller to pay it. Then it says buyer affirmatively represents that at this time, the buyer has a written agreement with the buyer's broker. It's valid, it covers a property, and provides for compensation that's not less than this amount. So that's why I was saying you cannot put a number greater than what's on the BRBC. Now here's the big disappointment in this change in this form. When you check this box, guess what form populates? What form you can't find in the C.A.R library as of today? It's the SPBB. If you try to look it up as a standalone form, it's gone, okay? And they've added it. Now, they said, let me show you, in the form release, right? So this is these are the changes that C.A.R released, okay? The SPBB is being removed, okay? There's no mention of the SPBB in the offer. Let me, if I can find it again. Here we go. There's no mention of it here. It doesn't say that you're hereby incorporating the SPBB form. It just populates in this 28-page bundle. So I'll show you. They even changed it a little bit. So it appeared to be eradicated. I mean, I did a search through this entire form to look for any reference to that document that you're incorporating it, and it's not. Why can't this be a standalone section? And I actually opened 2 transactions in zip forms just to make sure my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. Why did this SPB come up? Why is it haunting me? Why is it here? I created another transaction. I checked this box, an SPBB populated. So contrary to popular belief and this statement that the SPBB is being removed, which is in their December 2024 forms release quick summary, it's here. It's back. And it's, I guess, here to stay. Hopefully not. And there's no point for it. I'm going to move on, but I'll show you the SPBB when we get to the very end of this offer. All right, now you need proof of funds, okay? If it's cash or just a down payment, you should have proof of funds, and it's going to be in one of these 2 lines. It's saying it's attached to the offer. That's why you as a buyer's agent, you should have this long before you write an offer to make sure your client has the money, okay? Same with your pre-approval letter from the lender. That's what these are. It's saying attached to the offer. Now I'm going to go through this quickly, okay? Now remember, in Southern California, the seller pays the majority of the closing cost. Northern California, it varies county by county and even within parts of a county. I'm going to show you, for the sake of simplicity, the Southern California method because it's much more universal. Okay, so you have final walkthrough, 5 days. Okay, now we have contingencies. Basically, look at contingencies as being, there's 3 major elements of contingency for a buyer. You have the loan contingency, 17 days. You can check no loan if it's cash. Appraisal, 17 days. You can check no appraisal if it's cash. Finally, investigations, which are inspection, investigation, your buyer's due diligence, the buyer's research. And then they parse it out. This happened a few revisions ago where they parse this out into a bunch of different investigations. But it's all 17 days. It's all the same thing. These are all just elements of the investigation. Okay? So by default, it's all 17. If you want to modify it here, by all means, go right ahead. But I'm leaving it default. Upon recording of the property, the buyer takes possession. I'm leaving all this just like this. I'm not doing anything here. See how quickly we're going through this? Party's initial, we move on. What's being included? Check every box you can. Stove, refrigerator, washer, dryer, dishwasher, microwave. I mean, technically a dishwasher is affixed to the premises and should already convey. But for clarification, it's good. Just check whatever you can here so people understand. Okay. And then we're going down. If you have questions, by the way, because I've done so many tutorials on this form, I'm happy to answer them in the comments, about excluded. I mean, I could talk for hours about this form because I've dealt with issues on basically every line over the years. Licensed for 22 years now and closing hundreds of transactions a year as a brokerage. So believe me, I've seen it all, or just about. Okay, natural hazard disclosure, required by law, mind you, okay? Seller to pay. Provided by FastandHD.com. I always check environmental. Optional wildlife, I don't bother. Maybe if a home burnt down in the past or something, I mean, there'd have to be some extreme reason for me to order this, but they even write optional here because, the NHD is going to tell you if you're in a very high fire hazard zone. That's the point of this. This is just probably born from all the chaos from all the fires we have, but it's optional. Okay. Termite used to be called wood destroying organism. That's why I put WDO. But termite report, seller to pay. You can write whatever report you want and have whoever you want to pay it. Sellers should always pay for smoke alarms, CO2 detectors, and water heater bracing to be done. Why? The seller owns the property. They're in control of it. They're in possession. It's their problem. Should the buyer just knock on the door and say, hey, I'm here to brace your water heater? No, seller should do it. This is required by law. Okay. These I'm leaving blank because every time I check a box, I get comments of people freaking out. But this section is important because who's going to pay if there's a government required point of sale inspection? Now, I would say the seller, okay? And just leave it at that. You can leave this one blank, corrective actions, but sooner or later someone has to deal with this. And the reason why people freak out when I check a box here is because if the inspection report's not a big deal, and then the seller should pay for that. You should check the seller box. Remedial or corrective action, people don't like if you check the box seller here because what if there's a $30,000 corrective action? The seller shouldn't be obligated. Okay, fair point. Also, if the seller plans to sell, they're going to have to. So someone's got to, sooner or later this has to be addressed, period. So I see the critics' point, but there's a counter argument. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I'm just saying that, it depends what side of the equation you're on. But if you represent the seller, you don't want them signing a blank check. If you represent a buyer, hey, that's the seller's problem. They need to fix it up if they're out of compliance with the government. But I'm leaving it blank here, which a lot of agents do, and then they'll just negotiate it during the inspection period or later in the transaction because the buyer can still walk. So it's okay to leave it blank. Escrow fee. We're in Southern California, so each will pay their own. From an escrow holder, that's different than the title company. They split it up down here, which actually is less efficient than how they do it in Northern California and the rest of the country, where it's a title company that does both. But I don't make the rules. I'm just telling you how it works customarily. Owner's title policy, seller pays in Southern California. We put a title company in there. All right. And then this is by default already filled out. In Southern California, seller pays this. Only some cities do that. But when they do, the seller pays. HOA, seller pays a transfer fee. Private transfer fee, very rare that it comes up, but it does occasionally. This is an example of, you can put in another fee like transaction coordinator or broker fee and have your client pay if you want. And this is actually a poorly formatted section. This is really poorly written. And they should have a place for a figure. They should have a place where you can write like this. It should look like this kind of with an area for a figure. But I don't draft the forms. I just do tutorials on them. So you can add whatever you want here. That's what I'm saying. Home warranty. We have the seller paying, the buyer choosing. It's good. I've always been an advocate for the buyer to choose long before they ever added this verbiage. Maybe they watched one of my videos. Hopefully they'll watch more and they make these forms better because there's a long way to go. And the amount that the seller is going to pay issued by the company. Okay. So buyer's already chosen. That's the company that they want to use. I just wrote it in. They have a drop-down menu. Other terms, anything else you want to add, just write it in here. Okay. Most of this, do we see an SPBB anywhere here? The fact that they add that it's just such a facepalm thing. It's like, what? And then what's even weird is on the form release, how they said they're not going to add it, Oh, I already showed you, but how they said that they're not going to add it in here. It's just even sillier right there. SPV is being removed. Okay. All right. Maybe they meant removed from the general library, but there's no reason to add it here. It's already been addressed up above. Okay. So we're going to scroll through. This is just expanded text on all the terms we talked about up front. Look at this, 1217. My gosh, these things are just, okay. Liquidated damages. Buyers should initial here. Arbitration. The party should initial here. Someone that's been dragged into court so many times. The party should initial this. So there's 3 pages for people to initial on 14 of 17. Don't forget, there are 3 sections on page 14 of 17 for both parties to initial. Is it an entity buyer? You need to write out the name of the entity if it's a trust or a corporation or LLC. And the individual signer must be a person. See how I have Bobby Buyer? Even if it's, Home Flipper LLC, it should still be Bobby Buyer as an authorized signer. You don't sign Home Flipper LLC. I see that mistake made all the time. Party's initial. We're going through it. I mean, this is all simple stuff right here. This is people signing. You're filling it out like you would any other form anywhere else. You, as the agent writing the offer, you're going to sign here. Buyer investigation advisory. Lots of advisories and disclosures. We're only on page 20 of 28. We put the address here, and we have the buyer sign page 2, and we move on. Okay, possible representation, more than one buyer or seller, okay? Both of you and your client sign this one-page form. Fair housing, okay? 2-page, and both parties sign. Homeowners insurance advisory. Buyer signs. Wire fraud. Oh my gosh, I promise we're getting to the end, guys, I promise. Consumer privacy. Okay, now here's where this thing rears its ugly head again, okay? You want to know something sneaky too? Let me show you something here. This is the old one. Okay, this is the one that came out when it was first introduced. Okay, see how it says seller's payment to buyer broker? Well, they did revise it. They did revise it. Let me go back here. Oops. They did revise it because look, now it says seller payment in parentheses concession for buyer's broker's compensation. Even the title is different. Almost certainly because they're trying to skirt around the how directly it kind of pushes the boundaries of the settlement. The whole ridiculous lawsuit that started the copycat lawsuits and the settlement and all the chaos that ensued. So anyway, so this thing's back because we're looking at the RPA. We're now on page 20 of 28. Okay, you check that box and this pops up. Same as before, you got to write in the same thing that you wrote up top. Why is this here? Please tell me this is an accident and that zip forms just needs to be updated to clear this out. Why are you including this? Is it because of this extra verbiage? Nonsense. This form is obsolete, but it's here. And when I check the box, it's there. This thing pops up just like before. And you got to write in the same number that you wrote in the top on the RPA. You're repeating the same thing. Makes no sense. They just renamed it. And that's it. That's the new offer. I hope you found this helpful. Please leave a comment. Thank you for watching.